Someone spent $8,000 last year on a watch that can't sync to a time signal. Not because the movement broke, because the brand quietly removed the feature to save a few dollars in parts and said nothing. That's where we are in 2026, and these 12 watches prove it gets worse. Number 12. Shinola Runwell. Walk into a Shinola boutique in Detroit, and the whole room tells you a story. Exposed brick, industrial lighting, a placard reading "Built in Detroit." Whoever designed those stores understood how people make buying decisions. But "Built in Detroit" means the watch is assembled there using imported Swiss quartz movements and components sourced from abroad. That's not exactly a lie. Shinola says so, in the small print, if you read carefully. The deception is softer. The premium you're paying isn't for what's inside the case. It's for the narrative wrapped around it. The Runwell retails at around $800. For that same money, you could buy 2 mechanical Seiko, 5 sports models that will still be running in 20 years, no batteries needed, no brand mythology required. The Seikos won't tell you they were built in Detroit. They don't have to. What makes this watch worth discussing is that Shinola is actually excellent at design. The Runwell looks like a watch that costs twice what it does. The aesthetic earns trust the movement hasn't. And that gap between how something looks and what it contains is exactly the trick that lands every watch on this list. The person this watch targets wants to support American manufacturing and values storytelling as part of ownership. That impulse is real and worth respecting. But at $800 in 2026, the movement is supposed to be part of the story. When it isn't, you've bought a very attractive piece of furniture that happens to tell time. Shinola is the polite version of the bad watches. Brand number 11 is where things get real. Number 11. Girard-Perregaux Laureato. In 2022, watch forums couldn't stop talking about the Laureato. Integrated bracelet, octagonal bezel. Posts on Watch You Seek and Reddit's watches ran hot. Hidden gem, massively undervalued. GP deserves more love. By late 2024, those same forums were full of people trying to sell theirs. Watches that had been called massively undervalued were sitting on Chrono 2.4 at 30 to 35% below authorized dealer pricing. Full set, box and papers, unsold. The integrated bracelet hype that carried the Laureato was built on a specific market window, roughly 2020 through 2022, when anything remotely connected to the AP Royal Oak aesthetic was moving. Every watch describable as an accessible alternative got pulled upward by that current. Then, the broader watch market cooled in 2023. The window closed. And a watch bought as a smart alternative became an object that revealed something about the buyer's timing rather than their taste. The movement inside, Caliber GP 01800, is excellent. 66 hours of power reserve, beautiful finishing, properly in-house. This isn't a movement story, it's a market story. Buying the Laureato retail in 2026 means paying the premium that evaporated 2 years ago. Pre-owned at 30% off is a completely different and potentially excellent proposition, but your authorized dealer isn't offering you that. There's a broader pattern the Laureato represents. Watches that ride a hype cycle upward almost always land below where they started once the cycle ends. The Royal Oak itself didn't escape this during the 2023 market correction. What separates watches that recover from watches that don't is whether collectors actually wanted them or whether they wanted to be seen wanting them. The Royal Oak came back because people wanted the watch. The Laureato is still waiting to find out what it actually is without the hype. A watch losing value because of bad timing is one thing. Brand number 10 charged a premium for a movement that isn't even theirs. Number 10. TAG Heuer Formula, 1 Quartz Special Editions. TAG Heuer has announced a partnership with Red Bull Racing approximately 17 times since 2016. Each time, a special edition Formula 1 watch appears. Each time, the price creeps a little higher. The 2025 Formula 1 Quartz chronograph in Red Bull trim sits around $2,300. Inside is a Swiss quartz movement. Between the movement and the case sits a plastic spacer, a non-functional piece of material that exists purely to fill the gap between a smaller movement and a larger case. This isn't a secret. TAG Heuer's own service documentation mentions it. Watch journalists have covered it since at least 2019, Forum regulars on WatchUSeek treat it as background knowledge. The brand has never formally addressed it. The Formula One line started in 1986 as an affordable, properly specified sports watch. The original logic held for decades. At $2,300 in 2026, that logic collapses. That money gets you a Tudor Black Bay 36 with a manufacturer-adjacent movement. A used Omega Aquaterra with METAS certification. A Seiko Presage with proper dial finishing and a movement history the brand can actually explain. The Formula One Quartz isn't technically competing with any of those. It's occupying shelf space near them and hoping you don't look too carefully. What's the most you'd pay for a quartz watch, and what does it need to do to earn it? Drop it below. So, Tag sold you a logo. Brand number 9 is selling you a name while quietly shortchanging what's inside. Number 9. Breitling Avenger. Non-B01 models. Breitling makes one of the best in-house movements in the industry. The B1 is COSC certified and engineered with Selita's specialist manufacture division. It's excellent. It's the reason serious collectors respect the Navitimer and why the Avenger B1 variants justify their pricing. The problem is the non-B01 Avengers. These automatics and chronographs, retailing around $3,800, use ETA or Valjoux-based movements. These aren't bad movements. They're reliable workhorses that turn up in watches at a fraction of that price. The distinction between B1 and non-B01 isn't volunteered at the authorized dealer. An associate will say Breitling automatic and mean it technically, leaving the caliber question comfortably vague. You'd need to ask specifically. Most buyers don't ask. Breitling understands this dynamic. The B1 gets prominent placement in marketing because it's something to be proud of. The non-B01 models are quieter about their contents. That quiet is information. If you're considering any Breitling, the only question that matters before anything else is whether the watch has the B1 or an equivalent manufacturer caliber. If the answer is yes, the conversation changes entirely. If the answer involves Valjoux 7,750 or ETA 2,824, you're buying Breitling's aviation mythology applied to someone else's engine. The mythology is real. The engine premium isn't. Breitling knows exactly what it has in the B1. The brand has spent years trying to migrate its lineup toward it. The 2025 B31 manufacture movement for the Top Time line is another step in that direction. At some point, Breitling will complete the migration, and every watch in the catalog will have an in-house caliber worth the name. Until then, the non-B01 Avengers are the legacy of a transition period, available at premium prices, powered by movements that precede the brand's ambition. Breitling at least makes something worth having. Brand number 8 raised its prices without raising its finishing to match. Number 8. Seiko Prospex, the $3,000 tier. Seiko built its entire reputation on one idea. You didn't have to spend serious money to own a serious watch. The original Marine Master, introduced in 2000, was a professional-grade dive instrument at a price that felt almost embarrassing for what you got. That was the Seiko promise. The whole brand identity rested on it. In 2025 and 2026, the Prospex Marine Master line starts at $3,400. For that price, you get the 8L35 movement. Solid, accurate, well-regarded in collector circles. What you don't get is finishing that matches the price point. Case edge work sits below where it should be. The bracelet has more flex than competitors at this tier. This has been documented across WatchCrunch and R. Watches consistently enough and long enough that it's a feature, not a fluke. The real problem is competition. Seiko at $3,000 isn't competing with itself anymore. It's competing with Tudor Black Bay models that have METAS certified manufacture movements and finishing that actually matches what's being charged. It's competing with used Omega Seamasters with cases and bracelets that demonstrate what properly finished means at this price tier. Secondary market data makes the gap visible. Higher-priced Prospex models are losing 35 to 40% of retail value almost immediately. That's not a market anomaly. That's the market correctly pricing the distance between what's being charged and what's being delivered. Seiko under $1,000 is still one of the great watchmaking stories. Nothing on this list changes that. Seiko, at $3,000, is a brand that grew its prices faster than it grew everything else. And the customers arriving with Seiko's legendary value proposition in mind will feel the difference within a year. There's a specific kind of disappointment that comes with this one. A collector saves up for a Marine Master at $3,400 because the name means something to them. Maybe they started with a $500 Seiko SKX. Maybe the brand has been part of their watch story for a decade. They buy it expecting the same relationship they had with the brand at a third the price. What they get is a watch that belongs in a different conversation than the one they thought they were having. The price moved them to a new tier. The product didn't follow. Seiko misjudged the price-to-finishing relationship. Brand number 7 misjudged the price-to-movement relationship, and by a wider margin. Number 7. Bell & Ross, BRX5, at full retail. The BRX5 launched in 2022, and the watch world paid attention for legitimate reasons. Bracelet integration, 41 millimeters. A design that finally moved Bell & Ross past the square aviation instrument case they'd occupied for a decade. The ambition was real. The movement is from Kenissi, the manufacturer co-owned by Tudor and Chanel. Same movement architecture behind the Tudor Black Bay 58, which retails at around $2,300. The BRX5 on a bracelet retails at approximately $7,400. That $5,000 gap isn't justified by anything a side-by-side comparison turns up. Bell & Ross carries a brand premium. The bracelet integration adds manufacturing cost. Accepted. But a markup of over 300% above a watch with functionally equivalent movement architecture requires a more substantive answer than the case design is different. Tudor's case design is also excellent, and Tudor has a deeper development relationship with the Kenissi architecture. What you're paying for at $7,400 is the potential of the Bell & Ross brand as it eventually develops original calibers. Maybe that happens. Until it does, you're paying tomorrow's premium for today's watch. And today's watch runs the same movement you could access at less than a third of the price with a different name on the dial. Bell & Ross is asking you to prepay for a future they haven't built. Brand number 6 built a cultural story instead, and retail is how you subscribe to it. Number 6. Hublot Classic Fusion Titanium. In 2008, when Jean-Claude Biver began placing Hublot in football sponsorships and celebrity wrists, the Classic Fusion made cultural sense. Entry-level Hublot, visible in the right settings. Being seen with one said something specific about how you spent your Saturday evenings. The movement inside is a modified Sellita SW300. Reliable, generic. The same base caliber your authorized dealer will call Swiss-made automatic without further comment. Retail in titanium starts around $8,000. Watch Charts data from late 2025 shows standard Classic Fusion models trading on the secondary market at roughly 60 to 70% of retail. Chrono Hunter analysis puts average Hublot depreciation at 40% across the broader catalog. The Classic Fusion actually holds value better than most of the Hublot lineup, which tells you something concerning about the rest of it. The honest version of the Hublot pitch is this: if you love the design, buy it pre-owned. A used Classic Fusion at $4,500 is a completely different financial decision from $8,000 at retail. The buyer who pays new price is subsidizing the experience for the buyer who pays 6 months later. There's something almost deliberate about how Hublot operates. They create the cultural occasions at which the watch becomes appropriate and then sell you entry via the watch. It's a complete system. The question isn't whether the system works. It works very well. The question is whether $8,000 new dollars in 2026 is the right price to pay to access it, knowing a pre-owned version exists at 40% less. The Hublot Big Bang Unico, with the brand's actual in-house movement, is a different story. Watch Charts data shows the Unico variants retaining 60 to 75% of value under the right conditions, particularly Sapphire and limited collaboration models. That's still not Rolex or Patek performance, but it's a completely different position from the Classic Fusion standard references. The takeaway isn't that all Hublot is bad value. It's that the badge isn't uniform across the lineup, and the classic Fusion Titanium at retail is the part of the badge that costs the most to wear. Which of these 6 surprised you most? Drop the number in the comments. At least Hublot gave you a fully produced cultural experience. Brand number 5 gave you the oldest name in watchmaking and a movement from somewhere else. Number 5. Vacheron Constantin 56, self-winding. Vacheron Constantin was founded in 1755, the oldest continuously operating watch manufacturer on Earth. When you say that while someone is holding a $15,000 watch, something happens in the room. The 56 self-winding runs caliber 1326. This is a Val Fleurier movement produced at the Richemont Group's Central Movement Facility, the same source for Panerai's P900, IWC's 32111 family, and Baume and Mercier's Baumatic. Each brand calls its version in-house. In the sense that Richemont owns Val Fleurier, this is technically defensible. In the sense that a customer paying $15,000 for a Vacheron believes they're getting something engineered specifically and exclusively for that manufacturer, the story is incomplete. The 56-day date does carry the hallmark of Geneva. That's real and verifiable, and it matters. But the base self-winding model, at around $15,000 with a 48-hour power reserve and a shared movement architecture, is difficult to justify against what else that money can do. A Zenith Elite with genuine proprietary automatic construction and transparent movement sourcing costs roughly half as much. The price gap between those two propositions is the Vacheron name, applied to an entry-level model built on a group-shared caliber. Here's what makes this one complicated. Vacheron's overseas collection is excellent and priced accordingly. Their high complications absolutely justify the name on the dial. The 56 is the entry door they use to get customers inside, and the expectation is set by a name that promises something the movement's origin doesn't fully deliver. Vacheron charged $15,000 for a shared movement. Brand number 4 charges $6,000 for a similar situation and calls it manufacture too. Number 4. IWC Mark XX. The IWC Pilot's watch has one of the most loyal followings in the watch world. Forum members on Watch You Seek have been defending various Mark iterations for over 20 years. The design language is honest. The case proportions are right. At 40 millimeters with a clean dial, it reads correctly on nearly any wrist. The Mark XX runs caliber 32111. IWC calls this an IWC manufactured movement. The actual manufacturer is Val Fleurier, the Richemont Group facility that also produces movements for Panerai and Baume and Mercier. Watchbase and Caliber Corner have documented this in detail and at length. The movement is capable. Silicon escapement, 5-day power reserve, reasonable anti-magnetic performance. It's not a bad movement. It isn't exclusively IWC's movement either. And at $5,250 on a strap, that distinction matters to anyone who reads the marketing carefully. For the same money, Tudor's Black Bay 58 GMT offers a Metis-certified movement with verified performance specifications at roughly $3,800, leaving meaningful money available for a second watch entirely. This isn't a hypothetical comparison. Watch communities make it constantly, often in threads started by people choosing between the two. There's also a known behavior with the Val Fleurier 32111 family. Pulling the crown can produce a slight jump in the minute hand, a consequence of the barrel architecture required for the 5-day power reserve. Val Fleurier hasn't issued a formal correction. IWC hasn't publicized this. Multiple Watch Crunch users have reported it independently. The behavior may have been resolved in newer production. May have been isn't the assurance you want after spending $6,000. The IWC name carries real historical weight. The design history is worth something real, but the movement, at this price, in 2026, asks you to carry a certain amount of mythology alongside the watch. And mythology isn't what you want inside a precision instrument. The person who buys a Mark XX at retail in 2026 has usually done some research. They know about the Flieger tradition. They know about the Big Pilot and the history that connects back to observer watches built for cockpit use. They buy the Mark XX because they want to be part of that story without spending $15,000. That's a legitimate want. The problem is that the watch they buy has a movement that Baume and Mercier is also using, at a price that Baume and Mercier charges about $4,000 less for its version of the same architecture. The story is real. The price premium for that story, applied to this specific caliber, isn't. IWC dressed a shared movement in manufacture language. Brand number 3 took a different approach. They built a real movement and then made the purchasing decision terrible anyway. Number 3. TAG Heuer Carrera. Heuer 02, the retail trap. TAG Heuer twice? Yes. The Formula One was a quartz story. The Carrera Heuer 02 is completely different, and the problem is completely different. The Heuer 02 is TAG's genuine in-house chronograph. Column wheel, vertical clutch, 80 hours of power reserve, COSC certified. At retail around $5,000, it technically competes with chronograph movements at much higher price points. The movement story is real this time. There's something legitimately worth owning inside. The problem is that TAG Heuer doesn't restrict dealer allocation the way Rolex or Patek Philippe or even Tudor does. The Carrera Heuer 02 is always available. Walk into most authorized dealers on a random Tuesday and one is waiting. No list required, no existing relationship necessary. Chrono 2 foreshows pre-owned Heuer 02 Carrera models, trading routinely at 30 to 40% below retail, nearly new, full sets, full paperwork, sitting at around $3,000, while the authorized dealer has the identical watch at $5,000. Never buy TAG at retail has become standing community wisdom on our Watch Exchange. TAG Heuer has manufactured the most efficient gray and secondary market for its own watches in the industry, apparently without noticing or adjusting. The person who paid $5,000 at Christmas 2024 found the same watch listed at $3,200 in March 2025. That gap isn't depreciation in the normal sense. It's a structural outcome of how TAG Heuer distributes its watches. The Carrera Heuer 02 is worth owning, at the right price. Pre-owned, it might be the best value in mechanical chronographs under $5,000. The retail price is the wrong price, entirely because of decisions TAG Heuer makes about its own distribution. TAG built the most efficient secondary market for its own watches. Brand number 2 built one of the most beautiful cases in the industry and asked you to overpay for it anyway. Before we move on to the next part, let me tell you this. Most people don't realize this, but buying a watch the wrong way can cost you thousands, and you won't even notice it until it's too late. You walk into a store or browse online, and everything looks the same, but behind the scenes, there's a system. Prices aren't always fair, availability is controlled, and one bad decision can leave you overpaying for something that doesn't even hold its value. That's why I created a complete free insider guide to buying watches. Inside, you'll find the best watches to buy, the watches to avoid, and how to choose a watch that actually fits your style and budget long term. The goal is simple. I'll help you stop guessing and start buying smart. You'll find the free guide in the pinned comment and description. Now, let's move on to the next part. Number 2. IWC Portugieser Automatic, the finishing gap. The Portugieser is one of the most beautiful watches made in the past 30 years. The 42.3mm case, the thin profile at under 11mm, the railroad track chapter ring, the sword-shaped hands. These proportions didn't emerge by accident. Someone at IWC in the 90s understood something about case geometry that most watch designers still haven't learned. The Portugieser Automatic IW 500712 currently retails at around $10,800. It runs caliber 52010 with genuine Peloton winding and 60 hours of power reserve. This is legitimately IWC's own movement, not a Valfleurier product. The engineering credentials here are real. The problem is finishing. At $10,800, the case and bracelet quality doesn't match what Patek Philippe, A, Lang, and Sonnet, or even properly finished Zenith pieces, deliver at comparable prices. Watch forum discussions and authorized dealer comparisons since 2023 make this point consistently. The Portugieser charges heritage money for aspirational tier finishing. Those aren't the same position on the market, and the secondary market has priced the gap. The Portugieser Automatic trades at roughly 55 to 60% of retail. A watch retailing at $10,800 sells pre-owned at around $6,000 to $6,500. That's a 40+% drop on a 5-figure purchase. This number doesn't appear on the card in the display case. It appears very quickly in your ownership experience. Pre-owned at $6,000, the Portugieser may be the most beautiful watch available at that price. The case is still that case. The movement is still legitimately IWC's. What you've shed is the retail premium the finishing doesn't justify. That's a completely reasonable purchase. It's also a complete indictment of buying it new. What's strange about the Portugieser is that IWC knows this and seems comfortable with it. The brand has spent the past few years talking about higher tier pieces like the Ingenieur Revival and the Perpetual Calendar complications, while the Portugieser continues doing what it has always done, being the most beautiful watch at its price point on the secondary market and a questionable proposition at retail. A few authorized dealers in 2024 and 2025 started quietly discounting the Portugieser Automatic by 10 to 15% in-house, which tells you something about how the brand is managing the value gap. A retailer discounting a luxury watch before it's left the building is not a sign of confidence in the retail price. The Portugieser is gorgeous and asking too much new. Number 1 is in a different category. This is the brand that looked its customers in the eye and removed something without saying a word. 1. Panerai Luminor P9010 and P900 Evolution models. In late 2020, Panerai customers started noticing something was wrong. Pull the crown on a new Luminor, the seconds hand keeps running. No announcement, no press release, no bulletin sent to authorized dealers. Panerai's own website continued listing hacking seconds as a standard feature for months after the change was implemented. A customer at the Dallas Service Center sent his PAM 1313 in believing it was defective and received a written reply from the brand. Starting from FY21, the P9010 caliber has been gradually replaced by a new version. Does not have anymore the stop second feature. That email has been posted and discussed in WatchUseek and Rolex forums threads for 4 years. Hacking seconds is not a luxury feature. It's not a complication. A Timex has it. A $20 Orient has it. The lever that enables it costs almost nothing. The Panerai P9010 inside a watch starting at around $8,000 doesn't have it because someone at Richemont decided it wasn't worth including. Panerai's implicit defense is that hacking doesn't matter on a watch with a 72-hour power reserve. If you never need to synchronize precisely to a time signal, maybe. For a brand whose entire mythology is built around Italian Navy combat divers requiring field-accurate instrument watches, the argument is somewhere between ironic and insulting. But the hacking issue is only the beginning. What emerged from Italian Panerai forums in early 2022, documented by Periscope and confirmed through photos of disassembled movements, was that the finishing on the updated P9010 had also been downgraded. Movement decoration removed. Côtes de Genève replaced with bare metal. All of this behind sealed casebacks that customers couldn't open. Periscope described what remained as looking like those loveless, mass-produced calibers made in the Soviet Union at the height of the Cold War. Strong words. Not unfair. The smaller P900 followed the same path. The PAM 01225 ELAB ID, Panerai's own sustainability showcase, was opened by a collector who found what Periscope called an extremely crude movement. Not crude for the price tier. Crude as a standalone description. This isn't Panerai's first time. In 2009, the PAM 318 Brooklyn Bridge Special Edition was opened by a collector 2 years after its release. Inside, a bare-bones ETA, 6,497, at the lowest finishing grade, costing perhaps $50 wholesale. The catalog had described a nicely finished OP2 movement with Côtes de Genève and heat-blued screws. When the discrepancy was published in 2011, Panerai didn't reach out to correct the watch media that had reviewed the watch based on the catalog. They let the mythology stand. So there's a person who bought a PAM 1313 in 2021, spent close to $9,000, sent the watch to the service center, got back a written confirmation that the feature was intentionally removed. The WatchUseek thread where that letter appeared is still referenced in Panerai communities. The original poster wrote they were disheartened. That's the polite version of a specific experience. Trust placed in a brand, serious money spent, and the discovery afterward that the brand made a cost decision on your behalf, quietly, without disclosure. Some current Panerai models have restored hacking. The P980 powered Luminor Marina brings the feature back with improved accuracy testing and better transparency. Gold-Tech variants included. These are worth knowing about, but they're exceptions in a line where most current Luminors with P900 or P9010 variants still carry the downgrade. The existence of the P980 doesn't rehabilitate the policy that produced the evolution. It confirms that Panerai knew how to include hacking seconds the entire time and chose not to, for most of the line, for most customers, without saying anything. $8,000. A brand built on the story of precision instruments for Italian Navy divers. A removed feature. Sealed casebacks. No announcement. The word for this isn't a mistake. It's a decision. And decisions can be reversed. The P980 exists. It proves that. Panerai can build something that earns the mythology. The question is whether they'll apply that standard to the whole line or keep it as a premium marker for select models, while the rest of the catalog continues to carry a feature list from 2019 inside cases sealed since 2021. The Paneristi, dedicated Panerai collectors, have been having this conversation on forums for 4 years. Some have left the brand entirely. Others have stayed and buy only pre-2020 production, specifically hunting examples before the caseback was sealed and before the hacking mechanism was removed. There's now a documented premium for pre-downgrade Luminors on the secondary market because collectors have priced what was taken out. The market put a dollar value on a feature that cost Panerai almost nothing to include. That number, whatever it is the invoice for a decision someone made in a room in 2020, in a meeting where someone calculated that the customers who would notice were outnumbered by the customers who wouldn't. Every brand on this list is run by intelligent people making intentional choices. None of this is an accident. None of it is incompetence. The decisions that land watches on a list like this get made in rooms where someone weighed the cost of a feature, or a finishing upgrade, or a transparent disclosure, against the probability that enough customers would notice and care. Most of the time, the calculation came back in the brand's favor. The secondary market doesn't lie. It has no PR department. It has no boutique experience to protect. It prices what a watch is worth when the story is stripped away and the object stands on its own. Every watch on this list trades below retail. Some a little, some by half. That gap, in every case, is the market's honest opinion of the retail price. The brands that earn long-term collector respect aren't necessarily the oldest or the technically most impressive. They're the ones that act as if you'll eventually figure everything out and decide it's better if you hear it from them first. So, has this changed your approach to getting watches? Let me know what you think. Like this video and subscribe.